recognize this world as a place of diminished returns. And it's on the physical, like physics level, but it's also on the human level, as I see it, as far as the give and take. For example, if your love language, which I think it is kind of a universal love language, to help people, to be present, emotionally available to your friends, and like just to be present, to be there for them, to help them with whatever they're struggling through. And there was a time when I was a lot more of a giver than I am now, because I just had this conception that the more you give, the more you get. But there is kind of this aspect of, or this thing I learned, that some people, like sometimes you don't get back, you just give and don't get back, and then it's easy to feel like it's unfair, and resentment can come from that. And you're like, come on, universe, why am I feeling depleted or decrepit because I've just given and hadn't like received? But it's also important to know that we do receive all kinds of things, but sometimes we don't notice it. Sometimes we can't appreciate it, or something's taken for granted. And what I do to help reset from that is I'll just get out of, I'll go camping, or I'll go somewhere else that's more, I'll have a more primitive experience for half a week or a week, or just get out and go somewhere totally different. Especially camping, you can really appreciate plumbing when you get back. You're like, wow, this is so nice. So that's an aspect of the diminished returns. But as far as, on a human level, there's this biblical saying, like, don't throw your pearls to swine. Pretty archaic, but it means, like, don't give to people who aren't going to, like, reciprocate. Not that everything has to be, like, tit for tat, like you have what's the other term, like quid pro quo or something like that. I'm not saying it right, but where like you give without any expectations. Like oftentimes if I have it in my heart to lend a friend some money because they're in a tough spot, I'll give to where I'm like, if I don't get this back, it's fine. I'll kind of just give it to them. If they pay me back, that's great. But if they don't, like, if I expect something, that will definitely affect our friendship, because I'll take that as like I don't feel respected. But instead, if you just give without expecting any back, you're just helping out a friend. And if they actually like return your money over time when they're more stable, I mean, that's great. That'll even strengthen your friendship more, because you have more rapport and more trust. Definitely in relationships, I'm just maybe too much of a giver sometimes, as far as it's a value to me. It's an important value to be emotionally present. And I've been in relationships where I was able to be that for the other person, but they weren't so much able to do that for me. And it is arguable that it's tougher for men sometimes to be more emotionally like vulnerable, because it's not as attractive, at least to some people, as I've noticed. Like I've been, it's like ridiculed for like crying before, but that was just one relationship. But that was quite an experience, because you're already in a state of brokenness, and then the person you love is like disgusted by you. That's really tough. That really affected me, as you can imagine. But it's not always the case. But I think that's why a lot of men are more, I don't know, what's the word, like passive. Like passive indifference is such a thing, especially on the West Coast. Like, we are just a little side branch here, like, and, you know, I've noticed from the East Coast, on the West Coast, people are a lot more sensitive and or insecure, and they avoid confrontation at all costs. But when confrontation happens, it can be quite a blow up. Like, it can be like, you know, blowing up over the smallest thing. And, you know, I've done that, where like enough things build up and then finally a small thing happens and you like lose your cool over that, and it's like, that's just, I don't want to do that. That's such a travesty to who I am. Like, I don't, like, to my character, like, I don't want to like freak out or project on my friends over something that's trivial and insignificant in the grand scheme of things. And it's usually indicative that, you know, there's other things that have built up that haven't been addressed. And it's so important to talk about things, especially if, like, with roommate or with housemates, because you all share a space and you're all in a way kind of invading each other's space, not intentionally, but just that's the dynamic. Especially if you're someone that like really needs like solitude, like in the mornings. You know, unless I start out the morning with a ton of coffee and I'm like a little more chipper than normal, I can like be social in the morning. But oftentimes I would rather just not talk to anyone until I'm like acclimated to the day. You know, sometimes it just takes a while for our brains to wake up. But I don't want to give up on being a giver. There is something enriching about it. You can get high from being a giver. And it's argued that it can be a selfish thing to be a giver because you're doing it for yourself. But hey, both people benefit, so what's wrong with that, you know? As long as you acknowledge, like, that's part of the dynamic. I mean, it's fine. It's still, like, altruistic. But it's when you have expectations, that's when it's less altruistic. Because it's almost like there are invisible strings attached that affect us. So, whatever the case, it is something that happens in this life. And people, after like going through a lot of struggles and being taken advantage of, are a lot more like, that's a boundary. It's like they make a boundary, a wall there, because they don't want that to happen again. And there are those people who are more like energy vampires, or maybe they're just possessed or have an entity attachment of that, and they just like drain you and like need you to be emotionally available. So there are those types, and it just takes discernment to know where to give, because giving comes from the heart, or at least it should. Like genuine giving, as far as being a real giver, it comes from the heart, and it should be unconditional. But as far as unconditional love here, it's hard to say if that's really a thing, because everything here is conditional. And here's another point that I was thinking about making a video on, a whole separate video on, and maybe I will still. But can you love if you don't feel good? I think you can. But oftentimes, like, I've been a giver for someone, invited them over, be like, hey, do you want to have fun? Like with a family member, and always being the one that's like hitting them up and being like, hey, it's like, let's go have fun. I know you've been down lately. I know you lost your friend, or whatever the case is, or your cat, or whatever. And my complaint is that I have been the one many times to reach out to people. And over time, I get people that reach out to me, but I guess my complaint would be, like, I've reached out to this person so many times, and it's like they turned me down, and then also, like, they never hit me up, because I am very familiar with despondency, and it's very heartfelt and meaningful for me to have a friend reach out to me. And I have a couple really good friends in that way. Like, they'll check in with me and be like, hey, how's it going? Like let's go hang out. Let's talk and stuff. And just having friends, like real good friends, is therapeutic in that way. It's really healthy. Emotionally. And, that's the heart of community, I would say. In my experience, that's the beautiful, natural, pure high of life. That's one of them. As well as also creativity.